Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located. This is Dorothy Dalton from 3 Plus International. Now, last week I had the pleasure to chat with two top financial advisors from the UK, Yasmin Barlow-Mills and Jodie Phelps. They specialize in advising and guiding women through challenging financial decisions throughout their lives. So from first paycheck to pension, they help women make the best decisions for them. And one of the things that you'll learn is that there is a massive gender pension gap. In Europe, it's 29%. In UK, it's 35%. And in the US, it's even higher, I think at 37%. So wish I'd had this advice when I was younger. And I'm sure there are lots of nuggets that you can take away with you. So listen to this with a pen and a pad at hand and make some good notes. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Bye-bye. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located. Today, I'm here with two top financial planners, and we are going to discuss the problem that a lot of women, maybe most women, encounter in their working lives. So from first paycheck to pension, how to avoid the mistakes that most women make. So I'm here with Yasmin Barlow-Mills and Jodie Phelps, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you, and then we're going to work through a little program of each stage and each segment, and they're going to give you tips and tricks to protect yourselves in any financial circumstances. Yasmin.
Okay, I'm Yasmin. I'm a financial planner. I've been in the industry coming up, well, yeah, 9 years this month. So that's flown by. There's no kind of typical day. I work anything kind of from investment planning to estate planning, but also kind of supporting people through big life events and stages. It's goals-based planning. And similar to kind of Jodie, I work with a lot of women going through kind of big life events, but I'll kind of let her touch on that a bit more.
Okay, Jodie.
So I'm Jodie Phelps, financial advisor. I've worked in the industry for 15 years now, which shows I'm a bit older than Yas. Um, so I'm really passionate about financial independence, helping women become financially independent, and also financial well-being. Financial well-being feeds massively into your overall mental health. So feeling secure and confident about money, is something, yeah, I really help clients with. I'm a single mum. I've been through divorce, so I actually specialise in helping people through divorce, and different kind of life transitions. But yeah, that's me.
No, I think you've left out one important thing. Didn't you
Oh,
win a major award?
I did,
Yeah.
yeah.
You've got to
So
plug
yeah,
it.
I know.
Come
I'm
on.
always like, I'd rather someone else say that. So yeah, I'm last year I won an award, Financial Advisor of the Year, Southeast of England. So
Okay,
award-winning financial planner.
congratulations. I'm all
Thank you.
about women not being backward and coming forward. So
Mhm.
let's go through this sequentially. So what is it about women that makes us more financially vulnerable than men? So Yasmin, kick us off.
Yeah, I think culturally there's quite a taboo around women in finances, and we're probably left vulnerable because there's the idea that we can't be in control of the finances or the knowledge around the finances. I read a stat and it was that 19% of women would be happy to talk about their pay in comparison to 33% of men. I think that probably still identifies that there's also a cultural problem because 33% is quite low, but there's also quite a significant difference. And there's a lot of shame around money and women. I speak to women and they always say they apologize or they say, I'm sorry, or I feel guilty because. And I think we actually just need to start by taking that out and get rid of kind of any shame, any guilt. And I think there are things, you know, the the gender pay gap and that kind of thing, that we're probably there's not enough knowledge around or we're not talking about enough. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Jodie.
I think in a typical relationship, um, it's the woman who takes time off work to care for the children, or care for family members. And then during that time, when you're not working, obviously your pension takes a hit because you're not contributing to the pension. And even when women return to work, quite often it's a job that will work around the children. So it might be a part-time job, or it could be, some self-employed work when people then to kind of contribute to their pensions at all. So, from typically from when they have the children till the children have grown up, it could be potentially a massive gap in pension contributions. And not only that, but it's the compounding. So that money that could have been added into the pension is then, the compounding of that over time means there's a massive pension gap. These days we do see more kind of more even relationships where the man might take some time off, or I had a client this morning and she was the breadwinner, which I love to see. But it's kind of just being aware that if you are, if as a woman you want to be the one who's, caring for the children, being the same stay-at-home mum or part-time employed, being aware that that is going to have a huge impact in what is saved for your retirement.
And I'm going to be a bit of a stat geek as well here. The pension gap in Europe is 29%. In the UK, it's 35%, and then in the US, because we do have US listeners, it's 39%. So I remember you saying when we were having a discussion, the best time to start planning for your future is when you don't need to. So one of you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, Jodie, you happy to kick off?
Yeah, I think it's just always being mindful. I think a lot of people they come to us when some big life event has happened. They suddenly their partner's left them or someone's passed away. And I think actually, if you've always got full control and full knowledge of your finances and you're doing the right thing, then when something traumatic, potentially does happen, you don't have to worry about money, because money can add such a big stress onto that. Even becoming ill, for example, if you're long-term ill, if you then have to worry about money as well, it means that you haven't got the headspace to kind of focus on your recovery. So I think being mindful of these things. And for example, if you are, the one that isn't working or working a limited amount of time, it's having that conversation with your partner saying, should we still put money into my pension? Because you still can add money into a pension even when you're not working, a limited amount. But then as soon as you're working again, think actually let's kind of, between us put more money in my pension because I've missed out on these years. So there are things you can do to, these little things do add up.
Yeah,
Over
exactly.
time, obviously the tax rules and pension rules are different in every country, but I think being aware that there's going to be this gap if that's what you choose to do, and then think about ways around it. But I think don't wait until something happens to look at your finances. Everybody should at least once a year sit down, have a bit of financial health check. Am I making the most of the money I'm earning? Am I getting the best interest I can? Am I debts in the best kind of interest they can be? Set yourself goals, save as much as you can, all these things that you should be doing all the time, not just because something's happened.
Okay. I mean, and I think so. Let's just like go chronologically through a typical woman's life. So, Yasmin, first paycheck. What advice, what tips would you give to someone in their first job with their first paycheck?
Do you know what? This comes up a lot actually, and I've got younger siblings who are quite a bit younger who have just started their first proper job, and it's really then like starting quite simply of okay, what's coming in and what's going out. So when you start to fine tune actually what you're spending, maybe do that exercise and say, okay, this is what I think I need to budget for this month, and then actually set up a standing order for a savings account, whether that be, through your bank or an investment. That's a good place to start, because when you get your first job and your first paycheck, it's probably really tempting to, oh, I'm going to spend that, or I'm not used to having that. So if you can kind of account for your savings as something that's, automatically going out, then that's done and it's sorted. And I think that makes a massive difference to people. And then actually what's left is just left for you to spend then. So I would say that's a really nice, easy way to start, and something that's not super overwhelming.
So hold on the handbag. So if you
Yeah.
feel the urge to rush out and buy an expensive bag or something, then just
Yeah.
put that money into savings. Jodie, would you add to that?
Yeah, I think I would say to people, have you set yourself like a spending fun money amount each month.
Mm,
Work out actually what have I got I can have fun with, and then when you are tempted to buy the bag or going on another meal out, think about actually what have I got left of my spending money. So personally, I have an account money goes into, and that's my kind of fun money, and then I have money goes to savings, which I treat like an essential bill. You
mm,
Yeah.
forget it's there, but treat the savings like a bill. So it's like actually you spend what's left after savings, not kind of you save what's left after spending. Um, and also the other thing I'd say, it's really important to build yourself a bit of an emergency fund. We never know what's around the corner. Your car might break down. You might need a new boiler or whatever it may be. So as soon as you start earning money, your first goal should be, have a little bit of savings. Generally, we say between 3 to 6 months of your outgoings, just as a kind of rule of thumb. But yeah, build yourself an emergency fund, save regularly, set yourself a spending amount. I think they're really um, good tips, but also pay into your pension. The amount of young people I see, they start working and they decide to like opt out of the pension because they think I'd rather have that, £50 for a night out. Like the amount
Yeah.
that's going to accumulate over the long term. So I always say to young people when I give like talks in workplaces, if I leave you with any advice is don't opt out the pension, like stay in the
mm.
pension, because that money will accumulate so much over the long term.
So what I'm hearing from you is that no matter how small it is, to at least put something aside. I think a lot, and certainly the women that I work with, and they tend not to be in their first jobs, but older, even at a more senior level, they struggle to have that 6 month fund.
Mhm.
That, with escalating costs and salaries are not going up at the same pace as the cost of living. So what I'm hearing from you is no matter how small it is, start doing it.
Yeah.
Something is better than nothing.
Yeah.
So,
And sorry, I
carry
was
on.
going to say, like, go through your bills because the amount of people I sit with, and when you look at your direct debits and your bills that you're paying, they're paying for things they don't even use. Suddenly you can be paying for about 5 different TV subscriptions when really you could be paying for two. And then the
Mm.
30, £40 you could have saved could be then, adding money into savings. It's very rare that I see somebody who couldn't cut back somewhere.
Uh,
Um,
And
so
just
yeah.
to personalize this, I actually saw something on my Visa card where I clicked on one of these things. Do you want this upgrade on my software protection? And I clicked it, and I hadn't realized it was costing me 150 euros a year. And I
Wow.
thought, and when I checked, I didn't need it. So I think it's all, I mean, I am not a financial expert, but my basic advice would be check before you click.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
And
we don't know what we're clicking on. People like me don't know what we're clicking on.
a
So
client recently. Sorry, I was just
we
going to add.
talked
I had.
earlier. Yes,
Oh,
carry
sorry.
on. I'm interrupting you. Carry on.
I was just going to say I had a client recently who we found out she was paying for home insurance for a house she moved for 5 years ago.
No,
I know,
God,
I
I
know.
know.
So I was like, oh my gosh, the amount of money you spent, but just because she just hadn't checked through her bills. So yeah, it's so important to do.
Really
Yeah.
important. So we've heard a little bit through the conversation about, women who are in relationships.
Mm.
So and we'll talk about that, but let's just say that you are on the cusp of, the cusp of love and the meaningful relationship. So going into a relationship, how should women prepare?
It's quite a hot topic at the minute, and actually, Jodie and I spoke about it it's not that long ago. I think there are quite a lot of elements to it, and there's compatibility, there's upbringing. Everyone's had different environments with money growing up, so we're all going to have different opinions. And I think if you're in that place where you're kind of on the cusp, and maybe you're making decisions of moving in together. I think it really starts with having open conversations, because I speak with a lot of people now who are kind of, 40, 50 years into marriage, and sometimes things are only now just emerging out the woodworks. So it's really, really important that you're freshing it out in the early stages and not being afraid to kind of have those conversations, especially the women, because I don't know. I think there still is a taboo, and we feel like we don't have a place or something to bring to the table. But that's where it really starts, is earlier on. Um, Things, if you are thinking about moving in together, that's a big commitment, whether it's, renting or buying, but renting is always a good place to start. I say to people, okay, how about you have a trial period? That's what I did. Because actually you could rent for 6 months to a year and realize, actually that you're not compatible. And there are things that, come out of the woodworks when you start living with someone. So that's not a bad shout. If you are looking at buying, there are things like cohabitation agreements. So if you're not married, it just kind of sets out a legal contract whereby you can kind of determine who's getting what, if you were to split or if someone were to pass away, the kind of how the finances will be dealt with in the relationship and the mortgage and the kind of debt side of things. So that's always a really it's not conversations we like to have if we are on the cusp of love and we're in the bubble, but
Yeah,
it really sets the tone for the rest of the relationship.
excellent. Jodie, what would you add?
I think echo a lot of what Yaz has said, but I think resentment is huge. I think sometimes if you don't speak up and have these open conversations regularly, it's easy to feel some resentment about around money. For example, you could agree to split the bills 50-50, but actually one of you might earn a lot more than the other. So it might be, better to have that open conversation and say, actually, let's you pay, you earn this much more, so you should pay this percentage more of the bills. Or so I think that when you don't have the conversations, you can sit there quietly and think, oh, actually, it's not really fair. And I think that's where it all adds up and creates a bigger problem. So I think when you have little niggles, like, sit down, have the conversation. And the only other thing I'd add is it's really important to keep your financial independence. So just because you enter a relationship, you may have this joint account for bills, which works out really well, but actually still keeping your own bank account and be really aware of the signs of financial control. It's something we see a lot is when, you think of like these coercive controlling relationships, actually, suddenly you've got no bank account of your own and you're not managing any of your own bills or your savings. You don't really know what there is. And that can happen so slowly that you don't notice it happening. So I think ensuring you've always got your own bank account, your own little savings pot, have the joint accounts too, but keeping some financial independence and make sure you're keeping aware of the joint finances so that you are aware of what you've got together. Because I see people at the other end of it when they've 20 years on, they have no idea what they have, where they have it, what anything means. So I think if you can stay in tune of that from the beginning, it can help massively.
Okay, so that's massive helpful tips there. And so here you are, you've got your great relationship, everything is going fine, you're in the relationship. What should women be doing to protect themselves? We already touched on it a little bit with women taking career breaks. Jodie, talk us through that a little bit.
So I think, yeah, as I just mentioned then, I think really making sure you pay attention to what there is, and because there is often one person in the relationship who will take control of the finances, and that's fine, because it doesn't need two of you to be doing it. So I think having them maybe like an annual check-in together, sit down. I always do my annual check-in like that funny bit between Christmas and New Year, and you kind of think, right, what am I going to what do I want to achieve this year financially, and what are my outgoings now, because they creep up, don't they? So I think having like a little sit down together at least annually, say, what have we got coming in? What have we got going out? Should we have some joint savings goals? What can you save? Um, and also just, I suppose, being aware of the kind of red flags, if you see that they're kind of getting into lots of debts, or you notice gambling apps. And so
Yeah,
kind
I've
of,
heard about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
keeping your eyes open. But yeah, Yas, what about you? If you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think one thing that we do at home is we kind of change the language and it's okay, what are you adding to the pot? So I still feel like, well, I mean, I was on maternity leave, so that massively changed our situation and dynamic at home, but I still feel like I was contributing and I had control because I was still adding to the pot. So sometimes having those conversations and talking about it can make quite a difference. But also, kind of what Jodie was saying previously, the keeping the financial independence, but also maintaining your own credit history. That's quite a big thing. If you have been on maternity leave and maybe the dynamic changes and someone's paying more of the bills, it's still important to have something there for yourself in the background because you need to enable or make sure that you've got your own credit history for, when things do return to how it was before or things, further down the line. If you were to separate, what does the picture look like for you? So I think that's really, really important.
And that brings us into what happens when love leaves, as they
Mhm.
say. What should women be thinking of? Yasmin, you take us down that path.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is pensions, if I'm honest. I think it's something that gets overlooked massively, and Jodie probably sees it a lot in kind of the divorce space, but they are a marital asset, and I think women feel really guilty about kind of when I say going for the pension, but taking that into consideration in divorce proceedings and negotiations. But actually, if you have had a career break, if you have been a primary caregiver, if whatever your circumstances have been, that's still really important. And I usually have a lot of meetings where women don't feel comfortable with that to start with, and it's then a case of really explaining the process, what that means for them. And actually, whatever we decide now is going to build their retirement plans in the future. So I think pensions is a really kind of big space for, I guess, when love leaves, as you call it, and the separation, the divorce process. And we probably see a lot of that between the two of us within the practice.
And that's what a lawyer friend of mine said. When love leaves, it's only about the money.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's better to at least have knowledge before you start the process, what's involved, and to accept legal advice. Jodie, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception I see is that, when people start a divorce process is, oh, he's got this investment, he's got this pension, I've got this. And it's like, actually, when you enter a marriage, you're entering a contract to say, like, what's yours is theirs and vice versa. So your assets are then joint assets. So it's not saying, he's going to keep his pension. It's thinking, actually, you need to look at everything all together. These are your marital assets. You've got the house, you've got the savings, you've got the debts, everything, and then it's coming to a figure. And I think don't underestimate what you've done if you have taken that career break, looked after the children, because you have enabled them to build that pension, build them investments. So it's your money too, without you there looking after the children, for example, they wouldn't have been able to accumulate that. But that's very like a kind of a common thing we see. But in any situation, yeah, it's understanding actually these are your joint assets, and it's coming to an agreement then. Um, Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. I'm just trying to think what else I had to say.
I was gonna say as well, like I think the professional advice thing, obviously the go-to is that you might have a solicitor, but I think a financial planner is there to kind of take the emotion out of it. So it can be really easy when you are going for a separation to kind of be reactive and to make emotionally driven decisions, but having, someone there to look at the finances alongside the solicitor, but also separate. And we're not looking at it from an emotional point. We're telling you the practicalities of the situation and also there to kind of give confidence. I think sometimes I say a lot, and I probably the same with Jodie, is I always say, look, when you're negotiating or when you're putting something to the other party, you can say, oh, my financial planner suggested, because sometimes that's enough to take some of the emotion out of it, remove the onus so it doesn't feel so scary. And I'm happy with that. I'll
You'll
take
take the
the
hit.
call. Yeah, that's fine. And I think, don't kind of underestimate the power of having the professional help alongside you in those situations because it is very emotionally charged.
And I think, you like I said, you're not alone. You can
Yeah.
have people around you to support you. And the nice bit is once everything's concluded, it's like actually then you've got free will to do what you want and make your own plans going forward. And that's the exciting bit. You get to then build your life how you want to, and be in control of your own finances. And when you get there, it might feel daunting, but it does feel really empowering. But the other biggest mistake I see as well is people just think about the here and now. So people think about, I want to stay in the house, but actually they're not thinking about the long term. And if we go back to the pensions again, people are quite quick to say, I'm happy to not touch the pension, I'll just keep the house. But what I often say to my clients is, okay, how would you feel when you retire? You're kind of barely been able to pay your bills and your ex is swanning around on a cruise ship having a lovely retirement. So it's like, actually, it's so easy to panic and think about now, but what our job is to get clients to see the long-term impact of the decisions they're making. And the biggest advice is don't rush these decisions. Emotion takes over, and a lot of the time you just want it done, you want to get out, but these decisions, agreements you come to are going to be massive in the future.
Yeah, I agree. So we also touched about this briefly at the beginning, Yasmin, about people who live together, but let's just say, and an increasing number of people are choosing not to marry. So
Hmm.
what advice would you give a woman who is in, I mean, I don't know what they call it now. Do they still call it common law marriage, or what do they call it? I don't know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, common law marriage. I think it's exploring your options as well. So when you are buying, there's things like tenants in common versus joint tenancy, and that's something to explore. So tenants in common is where you can kind of decide your share of the property, and that gets passed to your estate, kind of how as part of your wishes. Joint tenancy, it's, if someone were to pass away, or that there's a separation, it can kind of pass to the other person. So that's something to kind of decide from the outset. And I would just encourage people to research it at least, and maybe speak to someone about it depending on their circumstances. I think, yeah, and the living together and not being married, it's then having conversations about what your wishes are. So have you spoken about, legacy planning? Have you done your wills? Getting the right protection in place. That's really important. I don't know if you'd add to that, Jodie.
The only other thing I'd say, and I know you mentioned it earlier, is if you're going to live with somebody and you're not married, protecting yourself. If you've got someone moving into your home, and they don't own any of the property, it's actually have something written down to say legally binding, say this is what happens if we break up. Because I've seen cases where the other person might put a bit of money into the property, and then suddenly they're claiming part ownership of the property, and they've put restrictions on the property, for example. So I think from the outset it's always good to think, hopefully you'll never break up, but in case you do, have a plan B, because that's where things get messy. So I think anytime you're going to really massively join your finances, like living with someone, letting someone live in your house, or you even moving into someone's house, at least if you agreed it at the outset, it avoids any messiness down the line.
So have a legal agreement.
Yeah,
And
and definitely a legal agreement. Yeah.
I mean, most women don't have prenups, but I mean that as women are increasingly earning more and more, I mean there must be a segment of women that actually bring a lot of wealth into a relationship. What advice would you give them? A prenup's worth of paper they're written on?
I think a lot of the time they are followed. I think they're not 100%, really binding. It could be that somebody, it could be then taken to court and tried to argue against. But I think it's something I would still do. If I were to enter a marriage now and things weren't completely equal, or, even if they were, I just think having some kind of legal agreement, you're going to be in a better position to have that there than if you weren't to have that there.
Okay.
But there are other things you can do as well, like trusts, for example. So I have clients, and for example, if they're thinking about gifting money to their children, and they think actually it could be that they're going to they think they're going to break up, or they don't particularly like the husband or wife. Rather than gifting to them directly, you can put money into trust, so then
Okay.
less likely to be split in divorce. So there are lots of things you can do, but it's very situation dependent.
Yasmin, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of taboo around a prenup, if I'm honest. It's like the curse word that nobody likes to, especially for women. Like they're just, I don't know, I feel that a lot, but I, like Jodie, encourage it because actually it's what you're bringing to the table, and having an agreement there in place really kind of sets the standard for the rest of the relationship, and also probably stops people staying in relationships with the fear of the kind of what happens after, because Jodie and I have both experienced meeting women where they've probably turned around and said, I've been in this relationship for 5 years and I want to leave. I've been in this relationship for 5 years too long, essentially. But I haven't left because I'm worried about the finances and what I've got. So even just having a prenup in place beforehand, like, should hopefully reduce some of that fear, because you've already set the expectations. And I think that can help a lot.
Okay, and then this is one question that came up to me, and we didn't discuss it when we were just chatting about what we were going to cover, but it was a question that would was posed to me is what should a woman do when she finds financial irregularities with a long-term partner? In this particular case, it was excessive spending on. I'm not sure exactly what, but I mean seriously excessive spending, which was damaging their assets. I mean, what advice do you give to women who find themselves exposed with someone they trusted?
God, this comes up a lot, I think. Unfortunately, I've seen it quite a lot in my time. I think a big thing is those conversations can be really difficult when it's just the two of you because it is emotionally driven. Sometimes having professional help and an advisor sat in a room, like I was saying earlier, just takes the onus off. And for some reason, I found that people are more willing to share in those spaces and have kind of open discussions. Sometimes you do feel like the mediator, I would say, but that's okay. So I would start there maybe, because it's so circumstantial and depending on how long you've been together, what are your
Mm.
ties, how early is this into the relationship, and that kind of sets the tone then, doesn't it, for the rest of the relationship. So depending on kind of those circumstances, I do think getting financial advice and sitting down with an advisor can really help.
So a financial advisor before a relationship counselor.
I think to get the facts out on the table, it's so separate. I often get asked, can I do counselling? And I say, no, that's not my realm. But I can at least paint the picture and everyone
Yeah,
understands where they are. And then I think the emotional side and whether that relationship is kind of repairable would be down to, counselling and a professional therapist. But
yeah.
I think at least establishing the situation and what the plan is going forward is a good starting point.
Yeah.
Jodie.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is I think that we're there to kind of help see what's under the bonnet, right? So, really
Mm.
get everything out on the table. What's the problem? What's going on? I think spending can be like an addiction. So it's not even the marital counselling, it's like more like therapy for the person who's got this addiction, really. And the other thing to be aware of is when you're going through a stressful time like divorce, it's emotional spending. I think when you're feeling down, we've probably all, I know I've done it before, like when you're feeling a bit down or stressed, that immediate satisfaction you get from, ping, like you've bought something, it just feels good, doesn't it? You get that instant satisfaction. So I think being mindful that you can do this. And for me, I always say to people, have a little toolkit. So other things that make you feel good. So it might be that actually, do you know what? I love FaceTiming my friends. I like putting a face mask on and having a long bath. I like going for a walk. So when you feel yourself in this zone, filling up your Amazon or your ASOS basket or whatever it may be, thinking to yourself, right, no, I'm doing this again. Like there are other things I can do to make me feel good. And secondly, it's something we call like the 24-hour 24-hour thing. And basically, if you put lots of things in your basket, suddenly you're about to pay, think to yourself, right, I'm going to leave it a day and then come back and see if I really need these things.
Okay,
Because
that's brilliant.
the internet's so good at like pulling us in and making us feel like we need more. So you go to buy, I don't know, a kettle, and suddenly you've got a dressing gown, slippers,
Yeah.
a hamster wheel, or some of these
Yeah,
random things in your
exactly.
basket that you didn't aim to buy. So I think thinking to yourself, right, I'm going to buy what I came to buy, and then tomorrow I'm going to come back to this. By the time you come back to it, your mind's, in a different stage, and half the time you won't buy anything else in the basket. So I think the two things is being aware of the emotional spending. What else can you do that makes you feel good? And secondly, 24-hour rule. Yeah, will massively help. But it is when you're going through these big life changes, it can make you feel good, but then it won't help you in the long term.
These are brilliant tips. So just to wrap up, I'm going to ask you each for your 3 top tips that to give any woman anywhere. Yasmin, what would you say? Your 3 top
Okay.
tips.
Open your own pension today, even if it is £50 a month. I would. Yeah, I could go into that, but I'm conscious it's rapid fire. Check your state pension forecast. So, has there been any gaps if you have taken a career break? National insurance contributions, and just kind of make sure, even if you're away off retirement, the earlier you can kind of be on it, the better. And then never sign a joint financial product that you don't understand. And this happens all the time. So, always get, professional advice if you're not sure, and it's okay to say no, I'm going to think about this and come back to it at another time.
Okay, and just for our non-UK listeners, the national insurance contributions are social security contributions in other countries. Jodie, what would you add to that brilliant list?
I would say understand what you've got coming in, understand what you've got going out. Like these 2 figures, what have you got coming in, what have you got going out, and then you know what's left to save. Dig up any old pensions, old savings. These can be forgotten about, and no one's going to help you claim them. So, dig these up and have a look what there is there and get some help on understanding those. And then the third one, I would say, set yourself some goals. I think when we've got a why, it'll give us more reason to save. If you think, right, do you know what, I really want to move house in 2 years. When you're thinking of spending, you think, no, do you know what, I want to move house. I'm going to put that money into savings. I'm not going to do that. So I think having a why really helps you become better with your money.
Brilliant. Amazing advice from both of you. Thank you so much. So how can anyone listening to this podcast reach you? Yasmin, we'll share with the slide at the end, but if you just give a brief detail.
Yep, so I've got my own personal Instagram, which is just YBM Finance. But Jodie and I also do have our own podcast, which is called On Her Terms. And funnily enough, we just filmed with a divorce lawyer, and that episode has just come out. So she's given some really kind of good insights into, I suppose, kind of, I think it's like around family law, isn't it, Jodie, is kind of where she sits. So the divorce process, if there are children involved, I'd say go and listen to that.
Okay, perfect. Jodie, how can people reach you?
So I've got an Instagram, so it's just Jodie Financial Planner, Jodie with an IE. Also, we're both on LinkedIn, so we both share on LinkedIn regularly. And then the Instagram for the podcast, it's On Her Terms Podcast. So yeah, if anyone wants to check that out.
Perfect, great. Well, we'll put that all on a slide at the end. Ladies, thank you so much. That was super helpful. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, and good luck.
Thanks
Thank
for having us.
you.